Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome SaltStack CTO and co-founder Tom Hatch.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, and the papers want to know.
All right. As usual, I get to close out the keynotes of the conference. Now, I've got to say, so far we've had a phenomenal conference and a great time. As usual, our speakers have not failed to impress, and we have had a barrage of absolutely fantastic talks. And so I want to give a quick round of applause to the people who have spoken and those who are about to speak today. Thank you again. All right. I want to talk to you about something which might sound odd on the stage of the fourth SaltConf. I want to talk to you about something that would potentially seem obvious to somebody who is in this room and had otherwise not heard of salt before. And that is, what is salt? Early on in writing Salt, right, you put a README with your code. And I had a really difficult time deciding exactly what I should put in there. Originally, of course, Salt was built as a remote execution platform so that I could fan out commands as quickly as I could come up with out to multiple systems. And then I added in configuration management. And configuration management has dominated a lot of the message. And then a little after that, I added in the event bus and the reactor. At the time, I'll admit, I didn't really understand the scope of what we had. And as we look back only to the presentations which we've seen today, we've seen multiple very different incarnations of salt's use. And so the question again becomes, what is salt actually? So to answer this question, I want to go back in time to not quite as far as we've gone back a few times in this conference, but just back to the early 90s. And I want to talk about a very inspired computer scientist by the name of Mark Burgess. If you've ever met Mark, he's beyond brilliant. And he came up with this concept that to truly manage systems, because of their complexity and because of the fact that every piece of software is managed in its own unique way, that to do that you would have to abstract that management of all of these disparate pieces of software into a unified, idempotent mechanism. This concept is what led Mark Burgess to create CF Engine. Now, this therefore gives us what we see as the modern configuration management paradigm. But as I went back and I was looking at the situation, I realized that there's more that we need to abstract modern systems than what Mark Burgess could see in 1992. And that if we're going to abstract the management of these systems, then what do we actually need? From a high level, my conclusion came back to the fact that I feel that we need an event-driven automation platform. Well, what do you need to have an event-driven automation platform? You need to be able to have an event system. That event system needs to be able to react to events as they come. And then it needs the tools to react with. It needs the mechanism to be able to reach out to the systems and manage those systems. Early on in the days of Salt, I would say that managing a system doesn't just require config management, it requires two things, state and flow. And I defined state as salt states, And I defined flow as remote execution. The idea being that we need to make those arbitrary changes to systems when events occur in the life cycle or management of a system. And that we also need to be able to have that core concept of idempotent application and execution of a system. But as we've introduced the event-driven infrastructure components of SALT, I've definitely come to the conclusion that we need these three components to be able to create a true, long-lasting automation system which is sufficiently flexible to deal with whatever the infrastructure you're dealing with actually requires. Which is why on this stage today we have seen different incarnations and different uses of SALT itself. Yesterday I had the pleasure of having quite a few one-on-ones with people. You may have noticed in your, on the app in your phone you could schedule a one-on-one with a member of SALT's management teams. And yet again, yesterday, something which is confirmed to me over and over and over again, as I went back and talked to numerous customers and numerous users one-on-one, and also as I've walked through the halls and talked to quite a few of you these last few days. Everyone's problem set is different. Now, this turns into a bit of a problem from a business and a company perspective. Normally when you start a business, so if you go to the Y Combinator School of Business Startup, to really boil down the method, you make a GUI that expresses something that's quite slick, and then you convince people to pay you enough, to give you enough investment money to build out a back end that isn't completely terrible. And then you create a highly targeted use case that solves a single thing around a single focused message. SaltStack has, for better or worse, come at the problem kind of backwards. Instead, we said, why don't we build a platform which abstracts a broad, event-driven automation system, and then on that platform, subsequently build targeted capabilities. And so this is, in a nutshell, why this question has been so difficult to answer, and why many of you, when asked, have given different answers or have come up with your own answers. I love hearing people's answers of how they explain what SALT is to somebody. And frankly, I've heard a lot. But so, in the end, I'm going to say that SALT is an event-driven automation platform, and that's why we can use it to automate everything from making someone's coffee in the morning, which I've actually talked to more than one person who uses SALT to, a la Dr. Brown style from Back to the Future, prepare food for them in the morning. All the way through SALT being used to manage oil pipeline sensors and up to large data centers. And it comes back to, we can abstract arbitrary distributed systems through these three components: remote execution, configuration management, and event-driven infrastructure. So there we go. So that then begs the question is, what is SaltStack Enterprise? Enterprise is those solutions built and bundled for those specific use cases. And a lot of the benefit of these solutions is that we can take the understanding that we've gained by watching all of the many disparate things that people do out there and packaging them up in ways that allow other users very targeted ways of managing their systems and expressing those capabilities. I've been very excited by the traction that we've been able to see with SaltStack Enterprise at SaltConf this year. And I'm thrilled that we finally have one to show you at a SaltConf. All right. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the infrastructure landscape that we are dealing with today. Now, a little while ago, 15 or so years ago, talk about the cloud started to really take hold. A little before that, virtualization became a thing. VMware's virtualization platforms were originally introduced in the late 90s. They were productized around data center use cases in the early 2000s. And the cloud itself, I generally argue, really came into being around the time of Zen, because we were then able to have things like Amazon AWS come into existence because they were able to base their entire platform on open source technologies. And as the cloud emerged, we saw a couple of patterns inside of the cloud, particularly things like platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, public cloud systems, and private cloud systems. And the notion became we need to move to the cloud. Well, as time has marched on, containers came into being, and the types of systems that we need to manage have also fundamentally changed. And we've introduced things like Internet of Things, as well as microservice architectures, serverless architectures, using containers as packaging mediums inside of what would be maybe deemed a more classical architecture. Just this week, I've talked to people who sit down and I say, do you think you should use the cloud? And they start laughing and saying, oh my goodness, our system should always be bare metal. And I've talked to people who are talking about moving large chunks of their software stack to serverless systems. And so what we have is a world of infrastructure models. Some of these models sure are bold enough to say that their model is going to usurp the entirety of computing. But I think I feel pretty safe in saying that that has never happened before in the history of the world. Why should it happen magically over the next 3 years? So my real argument is that the true model of infrastructure that we're going to be dealing with in the future is going to be a hybrid model. And that this hybrid model is going to have components of numerous different infrastructure models to satisfy highly specific needs of applications. And at the end of the day, what are we building these infrastructure models for anyway? We're fundamentally building these infrastructure models so that we can have the expression of an application. So, what do hybrid infrastructure models look like? I think that nearly, if not everyone in this room, could look at their own infrastructures and know what a hybrid infrastructure looks like. That they have a cloud here, a private cloud here, 3 public clouds here, a Kubernetes stack handling a particular application. And so, with this hybrid model, where does Salt fit? I'm going to go back really quickly to Mark Burgess. He drew a conclusion back in the early 90s where he said if we want to efficiently manage systems, we need to do one of two things. We can either build this abstraction system that I talked about, or we can rewrite everything. We can rewrite all software in a unified management interface. And if anyone knows what it is like when you think, why are there 14 standards? I'm going to make a 15th standard that'll unify them all and be better, then that means that we have 15 standards. And so Mark rightfully concluded that rewriting everything was maybe a little impractical. But some of the infrastructure models that we see today claim that they are rewriting everything, and that they are going to be able to completely usurp the entirety of an infrastructure. My fundamental argument is that, once again, that's never worked. So why would I bet on that? Why would I get up in the morning and say, I'm going to bet on the thing that historically has never worked? Where I know for a surety that the thing that has always worked is that you always get a lot of stuff out there. You always have more chaos, you always have more complexity. And that is where SALT comes in. SALT's fundamental management model supersedes the continuation and the development of new infrastructure models. It comes with the means to manage these new models, to integrate with these new models, and create bridges between these models. This is something that I feel very good about saying, particularly, again, after the talks which have been given in this conference. We've seen numerous talks about how SALT is used to set up and automate systems like Kubernetes. We've seen numerous talks about how SALT is used to communicate between different infrastructure model systems. And we've seen a number of these things expressed on this very stage today. And so with that said, I feel extremely confident in the future of SALT. And to quote, I think it was the Intuit talk, although I don't think SALT is future-proof, that was a bold statement. I do think that it will be highly resilient as the future of infrastructure continues to grow and continues to be extremely diverse. All right. I want to talk a little bit about how we are working to expand the SaltStack community. One of the major problems that we've dealt with over the last, particularly the last couple of years, is that the SALT community has frankly become really, really big. As you've probably noticed during this conference, we've started the creation of SALT working groups. We started very tentatively a number of months ago with introducing the first community working groups, and we've had a number of community working group meetings. Behind the scenes, we've been orchestrating and building exactly how we want to continue to expand out these working groups and expand out not only their involvement in SALT, but also giving them more capabilities around managing specific pieces of code inside of SALT and giving components of the community more authority, as well as meeting with members of the community on a more regular basis and having community members and community working groups directly tied into release cycles. Now, I was really hoping that we would be to the point that I would be able to present more details on how this expansion is going to roll out right here. But unfortunately, there's still quite a few things that we're working on to make sure that it goes as smoothly as possible. But I am excited to say that we have already reaped significant benefits with the working groups program that we put in place, and that we have seen contributions go up, and that we've seen overall utilization of SALT and a lot of the traction and downloads, et cetera, go up also as a consequence of this. And so I'm excited to say that we've got a lot more coming. Now, I've been asked a lot about this photo shoot. I've had people who are unfamiliar with this particular layout. Oh my gosh. I've had people who are unfamiliar with where this photo shoot took place ask us questions like, wow, where did you find so much flat snow? So I'll answer some questions really quickly. about that I've received. This is a place called the Salt Flats. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it is just west of Salt Lake City. It's a large area which used to be the bottom of a prehistoric lake. And so subsequently, you have this enormous flat desert of salt, which is a fantastic place if you write software called Salt to go and do a photo shoot. Bronze, our creative director, decided to make us wear these spacesuits. So yes, we were really wearing those spacesuits, which was very uncomfortable when I came into the office one day and he said, "Hey, Tom, come here. I need you to put something on." And my reaction is, no. I was going to say, Bronze could probably attest to this, that was my reaction, no. And so I squeeze into this spacesuit. As you may have noticed in a number of these videos, I'm really not that fat. But yeah, so we went out to the Salt Flats and we did a photo op, and Bronze did an absolutely fantastic job of putting together that opening video that you've seen, as well as all of these banners, which I'm genuinely kind of embarrassed of. But in the end, it's turned out for something that I think has been a really fantastic artistic highlight to the conference. So normally I get to close up my talk by thanking the community and by going over some community metrics. But Mark and Alex kind of stole my thunder yesterday because they went over the same numbers. But I do want to emphasize that the SaltStack community is one of the largest developer communities in the world. It is significantly larger than any developer community which is generally considered to be a competitor to us. And that developer community is on the same scale as communities which receive significantly more, let's just say, marketing press. And I need to be very grateful for everyone who has helped us come along this far. And at the same time, I am going to be bold enough to make a request. One of the challenges that we face, and one of the things that comes up quite regularly, is that we could just use more blog posts from people about how they use Salt. When I talk to people who are big Salt users, they are so deeply impassioned and so excited about the diversity of things that they can do with Salt that I also am incredibly amazed when, upon meeting them and hearing their stories, that so many of them have never expressed those stories online and have never posted it. My general argument in this is that, well, people who use Salt are generally more intelligent, generally work for companies that are a little bigger and need the extra functionality of Salt. Generally, they are engineers who are a little more seasoned and wise. And these people aren't the kinds of people to shoot their mouths off on Twitter. But I am going to close with one parting request. Help us show the world why you're using Salt. Help us express the diversity of the things which can be done with Salt in blog posts and, I'm just going to say, on the internet, without going into detail. This is something that we need the most of right now, so that people can better understand the value of what it is that this great community is bringing to the world. And so, thank you for your contributions. I'm really excited to see what comes down the pipe. A lot of the features and a lot of the functionality that I've talked with people about is really exciting. I try really hard not to highlight specifics from the stage, but we've we've had some great talks, and there's quite a few really exciting bits of functionality that's coming down the pipe. So let's come together continually and keep growing Salt and keep developing what we have, because it has a bright future, because it is built to deal with the fact that the world is continually changing, that infrastructure is continually changing, and that the demands which we have inside of our infrastructures and inside of our jobs is continually changing. So I'll finish up with just saying thank you one last time, and I look forward to the last day of SaltConf also, because I get terribly tired at the end of these. Thank you.